What's going on, guys? Welcome to the channel. Today we are talking about a modification that I just did to my 2023 Audi RS3 8Y. This is going to be a pretty detailed video because the way things went, I thought we're going to be very smooth. It's an intake, it's pretty easy install. But as I got further and further along the lines of installing the actual intake itself, things went really good. Then took a turn for the worse, and then I fixed an issue, and then things broke again, and so now we're kind of in a development phase, and hopefully I'm gonna be able to develop a part or work alongside with a company to develop a piece to make everything flow properly and work good, or at least make the install a little bit easier for the car. So that's what we're doing. So hang on tight, get cozy, and let's get right into this. Starting off, what did I purchase? So I purchased a JDY 5-inch titanium intake for my 2023 Audi RS3. It's the 8Y generation. And that detail definitely comes into play when we start to install and talk about the install. So keep that in mind, especially if you yourself are watching this video, if you have a 2023 or a 2024, or maybe a soon to come 2025. I'm not too sure. Those obviously have not been released yet, so we gotta wait to see, but I'm assuming that those are gonna be the same as well. So starting off, the basic install of the 5-inch titanium intake. How was it? Was it hard, easy? It was easy. It was what you would expect for installing an intake on a 5-cylinder. If you guys are familiar or have already installed an intake on these 5-cylinder engines and on any RS3, even previous generations, you already know it is a fairly easy install. As long as you have all the right parts and you have all the right hoses and you have, you know, the fitment is good, it's a quality piece, it's fairly easy to do, right? So just same thing, same suit follows with this. The install was great. The quality of the intake is phenomenal. I have to say, like, the design, or if you're really one to really enjoy titanium with the colorful welds and the different colors that you can get out of titanium, I would say seriously look into getting a JDY 5-inch titanium intake, because it is a really quality intake. The welds are phenomenal. Just everything about the intake is really quality built. With that being said, it is a large intake. You know, it's an open cone concept, so it's a 6-inch air filter with a 5-inch intake. And the couplers, it comes with 2 different couplers, both one to fit a factory turbo setup or an aftermarket 4-inch turbo inlet. It comes with those 2 options. So you're pretty much set. Whatever direction or whatever the car is currently set up for, this will fit, with the exception of a few things that we will be getting into. So routine install, nothing was super difficult when, you know, taking the stock airbox out, putting the aftermarket intake in. That was great. Everything worked. All the clamps that came with the kit were fine. And then it got a little bit complicated. So the bypass tubing, the tube that runs from the throttle body to the intake, and then from that tube to the diverter on top of the motor, that started to get really complicated. So if I have to rewind, I have some pieces over here. The factory tube that comes on these 2023 and 2024 RS3s is different from the 2022s, the 2020s, and earlier. So I will show you guys over here that I have, basically, if you guys can see this, and I'll show it closer on screen, I'll put up some different shots of this, but basically this is the concoction that I ended up coming up with for my first attempt or whatever you want to call it when installing this, because the original tube that came with the JDY kit did not work, and I'll explain why. So this is the original tubing that came with the JDY 5-inch titanium intake kit, right? That is supposedly meant for my car, a 2023 Audi RS3. That is not the case. So you'll see an elbow here, and this elbow is supposed to be there right here. Basically, this connects to the intake side, and then there was another elbow right here, and it went down, and it was also a lot longer. That would not have worked for my car for two reasons. One, it was too long, but two, the elbow down is, I'm assuming, is meant for older generation Audis, where maybe the throttle body's fitting to fit onto that tube was sticking up. So it would make sense, like picture it like this, it would fit on top of it. But for mine, it's the throttle body was pointing this way. So not only it being too long, it wouldn't even fit because I'd have to then bend the tube, and the tube's not that it's not that flexible aside from the smaller tube that goes up to the diverter on top of the motor. So I would first off had to figure out how can I solve for this issue, right? And my primary thought was, well, it's too long and I can't use the elbow to begin with, right? So I ended up cutting the tube, and I'll show you, I'll get close to the camera. So I cut the tube, right? You can see it here. It's not the cleanest cut. It's not an ideal situation, but it did the job, or so I thought it would do the job, right? So once I figured out, okay, the fitting here is not only gonna fit over the throttle body now, being straight on, and it fits perfectly on the intake. Once I got the factory tubing off, I realized there's nothing for this hose to fit onto, right? So, and I'll throw up on screen right now a video of the actual OEM tubing, and this is what's different from the 2022s to the 2023s. Again, I'm not 100% certain that this is different or not, but I'm 90% sure because I haven't heard of any 2022 owners having these type of struggles. So on screen right now is the OEM tubing, and you'll notice that this is all one piece. It's a corrugated tube inside another corrugated tube that is double-sided. It's the exact same fitting on one side and the other, that has like two screws that fasten it to the throttle body and one to the factory airbox. So not only will this original JDY tube not fit because there is no screws or fittings to help fasten this to the throttle body, there's also no hose clamps, because I'm assuming JDY thought that from the original generation or the older generation RS3s, they came with hose clamps, so you would just use OEM hose clamps on the aftermarket tubing, which again, I don't have. So now the problem arises, how can I get this tube to fit on the OEM throttle body without having to fabricate some type of fitting? And I come to the conclusion that I actually needed to cut out and destroy the OEM tubing that was supposed to go with the OEM airbox and cut this fitting out. So I don't know if it's gonna focus, but yeah, this fitting right here, guys, came out of the OEM tubing. And again, you'll see on the screen that I literally had to cut this right out of that tubing. So that was the first issue. And so I was thinking, okay, why don't I once I have this fitting out of the OEM tubing, I'll then have at least something that I can fit this hose over. I'll go out and get some hose clamps and we're good to go, right? So I did that. It fit over, again, it fit over the first, just like you can see here, it fit over the first O-ring. There's another O-ring under this hose clamp, but it didn't go over the whole thing. And there's some funky business going on with this tube that air actually flows through two fittings, I guess. Not really sure. But long story short, once I got everything connected, hose clamped together, I didn't have a seal. So I thought, okay, finally, I got all the hose figured out. I had to cut up an OEM hose, and I go to take it on a test drive, and I get a check engine light and a drive system malfunction, and it's saying that I have a vacuum leak somewhere, which obviously doing an intake, it's definitely intake related, right? The new plan is let's go out, let's get some pipe, some, corrugated hose, or this is actually coolant piping, like radiator piping. I went to my O'Reilly's, I got like 3 feet of this stuff, and thinking, okay, maybe I cut the JDY tubing improperly, or sloppily, and I just didn't get a good seal around the edge. I don't know. I really was kind of just grabbing at air at this point. So I got some tubing. Again, I showed you this so many times already, but this was the original setup. So you'll be able to see this, right? So that is the current setup that I started to run. So I put this on the car. Disclaimer, you don't really need any air or any tubing going to the diverter on top of the motor. That just breathes to ambient air, and that kind of just sucks in or blows out depending on whatever is going on the throttle body. So really, I learned that from a buddy of mine. Thank you, Chris. Shout out to you. So you really don't need that tube that goes to the top of the engine. So I just said, you know what, let's figure out how we can actually connect and get a good seal from the intake to the throttle body. That was my main concern. I put this thing together, made sure that it was like the proper length. I measured everything out, hooked it up, good, clamped it down, went on a ride, and it still was not sealing. The only time I would get a good seal on this or the other setup would be when I would put all the clamps down, or actually I would connect everything with no clamps, put duct tape around all of the fittings, and then clamp it down, and then finally I would get a seal. So I'm really struggling. I had that duct taped setup for a little bit, for about a week, or maybe a little bit less than a week, a couple days, and everything was going good, and then I lost my seal again. So I'm really struggling at this point, trying to figure out, what is going on. Why am I constantly getting engine light? I actually went so far into my whole car went into limp mode, and I was limited to 1200 RPMs to the point where I had to pull over, shut the car off. I basically had to do some roadside mechanic work just to get the car to actually get home. So I was really starting to get aggravated at this point, and I should not be having to run into all this stuff and go through all these hoops just to install an intake, to be completely honest with you guys. So that was a little frustrating. So finally, I kind of engineered a product with my father and I, and we just kind of, it's such a janky setup right now that we have, and I'll show it on screen right now, but basically what it is we took the OEM tubing, cut it in half, and then connected this radiator hosing. We chopped a little piece off of this, and we duct taped them together to create a really good seal, and we put a whole bunch of duct tape around it, and then we put a whole bunch of heat-resistant tape over that. So for the meantime, right now, that's the setup. Definitely not a long-term setup, and that's not something that I'm going to be looking to do. But it's something that I wanted to explain, and this is the reason why I wanted to explain it. I want JDY to be able to watch the video, understand what the problem was, and then develop a piece, or work with them to develop a piece that will actually work with our cars and make installing this intake just as easy as all the other intakes. Because when you do spend $950, almost $1,000 on these type of intakes, you expect the pieces to actually work or actually be meant for the car. So not that this intake didn't work and not that this kit wasn't meant for the car, but the tubing definitely was not. And the JDY will never know unless someone explains it to them. And so that's what I'm kind of trying to do. So anyhow, right now, the plans moving forward is to develop a piece that would be something along these lines, but would actually work. Something that would create a good seal and actually be able to be a plug-and-play type situation where maybe JDY develops one of these pieces that is just one O-ring, creates a good seal with a hose clamp over it, and screws directly into where the OEM fitting would be. That way you save your OEM parts. God forbid if you wanted to sell your car, you can put the OEM airbox in with the OEM tubing back in, and you're good to go. You don't have to destroy any piping. Or you are required to cut that hose, but JDY makes a hose that fits over this entire fitting and creates a good seal. Either one will work, but I personally think if they included a fitting, even if it made the kit cost an extra $50 for that fitting, it's necessary to make sure you have a good seal, because if you guys don't have a good seal on this tube, it will make your life hell. You will run a check engine light, your car will go into limp mode. Again, I'm just making this video because JDY, I would love to work with you on a product and develop something that will work for our cars. That way we can make your kit for the 2023s and up easier to install and a lot less headaches for people moving forward. So that's the goal. Again, I will actually show you guys what this fitting looks like outside of this tube. All right, you guys are gonna see, and I'm gonna get up here and get close. So you guys can see now. Let me make sure that I get in the light. So right here is the actual fitting, okay? And basically this fitting is from Audi. It is 100% OEM. I did not do anything, but what I was explaining before is the tube only would go over this inner tube, and there's space for air to be getting out from in here, which is like the next step up, which is the bigger diameter tube. What I was talking about before, if I had a hose that went over the entire piece and created a good seal here with a hose clamp, it would be too big to fit onto the connection of the actual intake itself like this, right? Because this piece fits over this small fitting, but not the big one. So I don't know if corrugated hoses can go from thicker to smaller diameter, or if you would have to have the bung on the actual intake itself bigger. Again, it's something that we need to think about, but I thought it would be helpful to actually show you guys what this looks like to develop a piece that might fit. Again, it's just 2 screws that are right here and some O-rings that create seals, and then you put a hose clamp over that, and that should be a good seal. I don't even think you need this inner part, this smaller tube. So again, it's just a lot of ideas. I mean, the tube, I don't know if this is important, but the tube does go inside the throttle body a little bit right here, like you can tell. But I can't imagine that's really important. And I think that was more of like Audi's design, because there was like a corrugated hose attached to here and then another one on the outside. Again, weird stuff, but whatever. So I'm not a professional at developing these types of products, but I thought this would be a very helpful video, because unless someone makes the video describing the issues, JDY, the maker of these intakes, again, great company, amazing customer service. The welds, just everything about this intake was phenomenal, aside from the hose situation. So they're never gonna know unless someone makes a video explaining the struggles, and that's exactly what I'm doing. So I don't take it the wrong way, JDY. Again, I love your product. I want to work with you to develop something, and you know, I hope we can come to a conclusion. Currently, I'm running the intake right now. It sounds phenomenal. It's performing phenomenal. It makes all the right noises. I have to say, if we can figure out the hose situation, this is going to be the best intake on the market. Personally, that's what I think. So thanks again for watching, guys. Really appreciate it. And stay tuned for some new videos. Again, I'm new to YouTube. I don't post frequently, but I think it could be a fun thing to do, especially if I continue to modify the Audi, which will happen. So we currently are running, you know, a AWE track exhaust with the JDY intake and Unitronic mid pipes. So I think, you know, we can push stage 1 with 93, which I think Unitronics kind of considers that a stage 1 plus. So anyways, guys, thank you so much. I really appreciate you guys taking your time out of your day to watch the video. And JDY, again, we will be in contact. If you have questions about this, I will do my best to answer them, and I will definitely be working on a piece myself to help maybe make a prototype that actually works with your OEM pipe. And if I can actually develop a product, I will definitely send that over to you guys. We'll do some business. So thanks again, guys. I really appreciate it, and we'll see you in the next one. Thank you again. Adios.